everybody. Welcome back to the Everyday Night. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jeff.
And Jeff,
Good evening,
uh,
Joe.
how are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Okay,
Uh,
thanks for visiting with us.
Hope you're all doing well too. Remember to like and share. And we'll see you next time on
Yeah.
the Everyday Night. Our interest tonight is to save you time. So we're just gonna
Yep, there we go.
thanks for
Yep.
coming and see you later.
So you did have a topic that you suggested we talk about, and I think it's a good topic. It's something that we both have a lot of thoughts about. And but
Yes.
before we get to that, what is your beverage of choice this evening?
Well, a I got an Iron Fish bourbon finished in maple syrup barrels.
Oh,
It's interesting. You only really get a hint of maple. It's a nice smooth bourbon. I think it's 80 proof. But you only get a hint of the maple flavor in the aftertaste,
okay.
in the aromatic of it. You don't taste a strong maple. So I actually added a Canadian maple whiskey that actually has maple syrup in it to bump up the maple flavor a little bit. So
Oh, okay.
on ice and just as it is. So, and you, sir, what's your this
Well,
evening's
I
beverage?
have an old fashioned.
Oh, excellent.
Get out of the way of everything here. This is so the way I make the an old fashioned, I use the old method. I use sugar cubes,
Okay.
and I use two sugar cubes. One I saturate with um, Angostura bitters, and the other I saturate with orange bitters, and
Okay.
then crush those. Add, in this case, Uncle Nearest 1856,
Mm-hmm.
and then some ice and stir it, and I like it. And I have made an old fashioned before with actual maple syrup
Yes.
instead of sugar or simple syrup. And if you want to bump up the maple flavor of your old fashioned or your, I suggest try some actual maple syrup in it.
I looked at I have maple syrup in the refrigerator and I looked at it and thought that might be a little too syrupy for this evening's.
It it takes some um it takes some experimenting to get the
Yeah,
right amount
right. And I didn't
based
want to.
on the particular maple syrup and so on.
Yeah, I've got some very. I know the guy who got it out of the tree and boiled it down, syrup.
Nice. Nice.
So yeah. Well, anyway,
Nice. Well,
do
I'm
you?
coming over to your house for pancakes then. So,
All right, bring the pancakes. I'll bring the syrup.
okay. Well, here's to you.
Your health, sir.
I
Yeah,
had
that'll
I
do it.
had a short while ago a smoked old fashioned, and what they did was they put the ingredients in a bottle and then pumped the smoke in the bottle and
Mm-hmm.
then rotated the bottle to really infuse the bourbon with the smoke and then poured it in a ice filled glass, and that was really good because the smoke was throughout. So
Yeah. In fact, I've had recently a smoked maple old fashioned,
well, yeah.
and it uses the same Ironfish maple bourbon.
Nice.
Um, so,
So
so-
what would you like to talk about this
well,
evening?
this has been a subject of some debate in the political landscape, and while I'm loath for us to get at this stage too far into the politics of things, but it's a community concern to me, and I know that you have feelings about this too, being in this profession. That to me there is a disturbing, or at least an unprecedented, I think, at least in our most of our lifetimes, a concern about or coming from parents about the curriculum their children are getting in public schools.
Parental control of curriculum.
Yes.
Yes.
Um,
I
Parents,
have I have feelings, I have thoughts about this as well. I have both.
right. Okay. So we see
It pisses
now,
me off and I have reasons for it, which is
okay, and I think we
feelings
are
and
probably
thoughts.
going to be going to be congruent on these
Yeah.
reasons,
Yeah.
um, but we see now, we see in the news parents causing disturbances at school board meetings and PTA meetings over book choices in the library, um, what certain things being taught in classrooms, um, what whether things like Ten Commandments should be up in every classroom. Um, these kinds of things are the our parents are pushing, and I think it's a something I have never seen before. I mean, parents were always supposed to be taking an interest in their child's education, but and there's also the sort of I understand a trend of parents uh, uh, dominating the teachers into allowing their children leeway in class, or requiring them to be excused from misbehavior, is an outgrowth of this, I think.
There are actually a couple of former teachers I follow who are now content creators,
Hmm.
um, who mostly um, have reenactments of
Yeah, right. I think
terrible situations they've had to deal with parents and administration.
yes.
Now, I was certified in secondary education in art. Before I got a teaching job, I got a job in design illustration that led into a career in advertising and marketing, and then went back into academia, but in the college and university. And so I am an educator. I've taught at 6 colleges and universities in 3 states. I've been teaching for more than 15 years,
Hmm.
almost 16 years. Um, and I studied the subject of education a lot. I do not have children. Uh, we do not have children, but I have an interest in education because I want to live in an educated society. Um,
Exactly. We
so
agree there, and
yes,
in the same circumstance and for the same reason.
yes. The the interest when parents have been encouraged to take an interest in their children's education, that meant meeting with the teachers, seeing what they could do to help their children learn the required lessons and
Hmm.
subjects, giving them resources, taking them to the library, helping them. My mother helped me with my penmanship and spelling words, and when a teacher said, I'll get into the stories later because I have many of them. My parents were very supportive of my education. They did not interfere
Right.
other than when my junior high school library teacher would not let me check out I was in junior high. I wanted to read the great big adventure stories, the Three Musketeers and
Robert Louis
20,000 Leagues
Stevenson's.
Under the Sea and Robert Louis Stevenson and Jules Verne and all of those big kind of adventure stories. And Miss Maurice did not want me to. My I told my mother, and she came to school and she stood with me in front of the teacher and said, he will read whatever he wants. And if he does not understand it, he will ask us. But you are not to prohibit him from reading anything in here.
Yeah.
And that's the exact opposite of what some parents are doing now. The so-called moms for liberty, or
It's almost certainly named inappropriately like
yes,
that.
it always, the names of these groups always remind me what some comedian, I don't remember who, said about subdivisions. They're always named for the things that are torn down to
To
put up
build
the
them.
subdivision.
Well,
It's,
it's also double
Oak
speak,
Hill,
right?
so they flatten the hill and they cut down the
Yeah.
oaks. So
Or but it's also double speak, right?
it absolutely is, which is a reference to a book that
That's
they
banned.
don't. Yeah, um, there's George Orwell's
Hmm.
1984, and Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, both of which should be required reading, not
Yes.
banned. Um, I think that what used to happen is that parents who wanted to exercise a strict control over what their students learned sent them to a private school that
Yes.
agreed with the parents' agenda,
Right.
or a parochial school.
Sure.
But now they're trying to impose that on public school, and some parents at religious schools, parochial schools, want tax dollars to go to support those.
Right. Vouchers and such
Yes. Well,
is
and
another thing.
there's also charter schools. And instead of fixing public schools, they're pulling their support.
Right.
Um, well, don't pull you're a citizen. You owe support for public services and public education, which had to be required because there were student parents who didn't want to send their children to public education. This was 19th century,
Yeah.
but
Well, they were too valuable working the farm all day
yes. Um,
in a factory.
one of the colleges I taught at was a community college in area far about an hour outside of Pittsburgh, and the department chair said, "Yeah, there are a lot of students here whose parents oppose the idea of them going to college at all. They
Right.
think that working in a factory was good enough for me, should be good enough for you. I'm a working man, you should be too."
And
And
you don't want to go to college and get turned into a communist.
well, there's certainly some of that. Um, the I think the current I see the current wave of so-called parental rights movements where it's parents trying to exercise control over public education curriculum rather than putting their kids in
Hmm.
a private school. I see it as part of a long plan. I don't know that plan is the right word because I don't think it was necessarily a plan in foresight, but it certainly looks like one in retrospect.
Yes. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
And
that first um, withdraw public state support for universities, thereby shifting the burden of supporting universities to the students, who then have to
right.
take out loans to do that.
Right.
Um, then um, um,
Cutting funding to public
cutting funding to public
primary
schools,
schools.
primary schools, and encouraging students to, you don't need to go to college. You can pursue a trade. You can now, no, I am not in any way dismissing or insulting the people who work in trades. They are absolutely essential. Um, but what I'm seeing is colleges and universities becoming for the children of a privilege for those who are already privileged, the children of the
Yes.
wealthy.
Well,
And
I think you skipped a step though.
I did, but and we can get back to that. But the colleges and universities becoming a place for the children of the wealthy, where they can network, where they can make connections, where they already are going in with connections and can move right out of that and stay in that
Hmm.
elite. And I'm we should talk about the difference between elite as a good thing and elite as a bad thing. But then the children of the not privileged will become the tradesmen. It's a feudal. It's like a return to the feudal system
Right.
of those who work, those who pray, and those who, well, they don't fight. They send
They don't
others to
fight.
fight for them. They rule
Right.
over everyone. But I did skip a step.
Well, yes, because there was a point at which, and I'm going to go all the way back to, like you said, the 18th century when public schools, when the, particularly in this country, not in Europe necessarily by this point so much, but in this country, I keep talking about the founding fathers, but this is a whole group of people who believed that to safeguard democracy, we needed an educated population,
Yes.
right? And that's, you still hear that touted around, but it's more of a slogan than an actuality by a lot of people. So public schools were established free of charge to anyone who wanted to attend. And as you said, it became mandatory because parents weren't sending their kids to school, and it was felt that it was important enough for them to gain that education so they could not be controlled by their government.
Yeah.
Now, and that worked, and then in the early 19th century and late 19th century, public schools, our education system ran along pretty smoothly. It was a state by state thing. And then this is a kind of a complex thing, a lot of converging issues here. Like um, uh, when textbooks were usually written and published within the state in which they were distributed. Then massive, uh, industrial,
Yeah.
uh, economic factors kind of moved all the publishing of textbooks to Texas, as it
Well,
turns out.
Texas was the largest consumer because it was a large state. So they were the largest buyer. So
Right,
rather than, as some publishers did initially, produce a Texas version and then a
right.
non-Texas version, which is horrible when you think of it. They just produced one version, and whatever Texas said, that became the textbook nationwide. And I know when I was a high school student, I had a lot of problems
Oh,
with
yeah.
the textbooks. And I remember in our uh, government class, we had a required government class, because 2 years of government were required. Your in your sophomore and in your senior year, 2 years of government and
Hmm.
or civics were required. Um, and a group of us went to the teacher in our junior year and said, we find the assignments and this book to be insufficient. We require something more real and substantial and challenging. And the teacher, now I understand now why the teacher got kind of irked because it just made more work for the teacher.
Right.
But the teacher said, okay, every week you'll find a newspaper article on a current event and you'll write a 1 page paper, minimum 1 page paper on it. And we all said, yeah, that's great. Because we were already all reading newspapers
Right.
and very well versed in current events.
And it pushed the work back onto you, at least for
It did. I thought it was smart. And I've actually done stuff like that with students in a version of that. But there were other students who, yeah, they were fine answer the questions at the end of the chapter. And the questions were not about substantial matters. The questions were simply to prove that you had read
yeah,
the
right.
content.
You regurgitate what's in the book.
What
And that's
color
like
was the necktie of Thomas Jefferson? Irrelevancies.
well, and that gets into the in the 80s the um standardized test thing.
Well, the
Well,
standardized testing, which I skipped,
well, that's
was
not, but that's not all. Let me go
oh
back further
yeah,
before
okay,
we get to
okay,
that,
yeah, yeah,
right? The 60s and 70s, I think, still it was being sort of pushed that um, even the 50s, really, get good grades in high school, you can get a scholarship to go to college, and you can do better than your parents, right? I mean, that was
yeah,
kind of the
yeah,
American plan, right? Go to college, get a good job. You know, you don't have to work in a factory. You don't have to dig ditches for a living. You can be an engineer, or you can be a lawyer, or you
yeah.
know, all these professions that you can
Yes,
enter with
because
a college education.
as as I said, the trades are very important, but
Yeah, indeed.
they are tough work.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
tough work, and if you're doing a trade and it's a very physical thing, it's physical, so it's manly. It's not any of this book stuff,
Yeah, right.
but it's going to take a toll on your body, and unless you have the innate smarts to make it, start your own company or make it into management or something, it's you just can't do that. Keep doing that.
Right.
And
But
and yet there are the same people, some of the same people are saying, "Oh, we should raise the retirement age, raise the age of Social Security." Meanwhile, people are burning themselves out with physical work at a
right.
younger age. Oh,
And
so,
so that was 50s, 60s, 70s. That was kind of
yeah.
the mantra of parents and schools' primary education was to get you prepared to go get this additional
Yes.
education that would allow you to better yourself, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then in the 80s, and that money was there to do that.
Yeah.
Then in the 80s, Reagan, as you've pointed out numerous times, slashed all of that money away. So it became harder to get into college.
He started doing that when he was governor of California and said, "Why should I pay for students to go to college where they can protest me?" Because the
Yes, in the
University of California system was so inexpensive as to be almost free at that time.
but by 1980, when he was elected president, Congress got behind that, and
Yes.
states started all over the country started doing the same thing.
Yeah. Yes.
So so then, just like you said, and now those are the steps that I think we missed. So now it is once again, now you have to either indenture yourself or have a family that can put you through school without incredible hardship.
Yes.
And it feeds back up to the elite. Only people who already have money can get into professions that make more money.
Yes. Um,
So,
there's a certain, like, the percentage. I saw this figure. I'll have to verify it, but I saw the percentage of scholarship students, or need-based and or academic scholarship students has shrunk over the
yeah,
years. Um, and
And I was fortunate, and people talk about privilege and everything. I was fortunate enough to be in the situation where my family was, I mean, I single parent
yeah,
family. My mother was a waitress
yeah,
growing up, and we had no money to spare for a higher education, but there were grants and scholarships and work programs, co-op work programs available. I still had to take out a loan, but most of that was to cover living expenses
yeah,
because where I went to school, there was no student housing. Yeah, I had to go rent an apartment in town, and I still had to work 20 to 30 hours a week on top of my full load of classes. So, you know, it wasn't easy. And I can understand people saying, well, you know, I had to work. That's how I got through school. I did this and that. Yeah, I did that too. But I only took out $7,500 in student loans.
yeah,
I'm not buried under six figures of loans.
yeah. And the I saw a calculation that, well, yeah, you if you worked full time during the summer and it was just a minimum wage job, you could earn enough to pay for most of a year of college at some point in time. But
Okay.
the minimum wage has not kept up
Right.
with the cost of university because three factors leading to the rise in cost of university that's far outpaced
Hmm.
the wages and inflation, the lack of state support, the so shifting the burden to tuition, the increase in the number of and compensation of administrators, and the building of amenities to compete more for those students.
Yeah.
And that led to a huge rise. It's not as I've heard people say, well, it's the student loans are the problem. If students couldn't get these loans, then there wouldn't. No, then you've got that backwards. You're
Right.
blaming the symptom for the cause. But yeah, I was in a very similar kind of situation. It was my parents always assumed I would go to college, and I always assumed so as well. And the college I chose, I I think at the time I went there that half the students there were on some kind of scholarship or aid,
Hmm.
and the other half came from families who had buildings named after them. That's the way it felt sometimes, a real dichotomy there. And but I went there and yeah, I worked, people talk about these great spring break trips. No, I worked. I worked
Yeah, me
summers,
too.
I worked spring breaks. During the year, I worked uh um um I, f- I designed and illustrated ads for the school paper and posters for
Yeah.
concerts and stuff. Which one of my art professors got really mad about. But
Why?
oh, because it wasn't art, it was commercial.
Commercial. Oh, see, that's the school I
Yeah,
went to a
yeah,
small private design school,
yeah.
and not an art school, a design
Designs.
school, commercial design.
Yeah, and I
And
was an art student, but
yeah, it
it was good. I've come to appreciate really through the process of writing the book that I did that was just published. It was about um, um, the university that I've come to appreciate how good it was, how much I learned from the people and reconnecting with the people I was there with. Um, but I could not have without the grants and small loans, relatively small loans, which were still a lot to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it still took me 10 years to pay it off because that
yeah,
was still in the 80s and it was
yeah,
difficult to get work in a commercial design
yeah.
house.
And it was, but that it was expected, it was understood that education was the way forward.
Right.
Education was the key to advancement. In
And before that, I just wanted to reiterate that. And before that, before higher education became the way to advancement, basic education was necessary to be a good citizen.
yes, yes.
So,
I remember posters about that
yeah, yeah.
in school. I remember a poster with Superman on it, you know,
And
about being a
it's
good citizen
sure.
and good citizenship. And it just the people have either a short memory or no understanding of history or are in denial about it or choose to ignore it. But when people talk about public school as indoctrination, are you kidding me? We had what is good citizenship? We had a citizenship grade.
Hmm.
You know, I remember seeing that, and I have some of my old elementary school report cards.
And
Um,
what inflames me about those indoctrination claims, these are the same people that want to put commandments up and have taken their child to a some denomination of church since they were a babe in arms,
yes,
literally. So
and
let's talk about indoctrination, shall we?
well, and as someone said, if if teachers are not indoctrinating students, they can't even get them to read the syllabus.
Right.
And uh, um, the um, the Ten Commandments in schools, in the classroom, in public places, clearly violation of
Yes.
separation church and state, which some people deny exists, although it certainly does. The different denominations have different versions of the Ten Commandments, different numberings, different wording.
Yep. True.
So any one version is going to violate the religious freedom of others by
Yes.
establishing a religion, saying this is the one. Excuse
It's
me.
I remember when I was in elementary school, I went to school in a I don't want to say predominantly, but it was a significant percentage of the population were Jewish. And the school couldn't officially recognize, Yom Kippur or Hanukkah or whatever for those kids to be out of school. We just didn't talk about it. Just nothing
Yeah.
really happened. But we had I remember this distinctly, and we put up Santas and Christmas trees, and we made little paper dreidels and learned that, and menorahs and what menorahs represent, and in class
Yeah.
alongside the Christian stuff, what Christmas was about.
Yeah. I remember.
We didn't learn what the Hindu or the
Yeah.
Islam was about, but there wasn't no one in that community at that time that, right? So,
Yeah. It always seemed to me in elementary school, before that was kind of thing was prohibited, that there was a lot of talk about Christmas. And then one Jewish student was asked to come to the front of the class and explain the holiday. And it would be like, yeah, this is matzah. Thank you very much, and go sit down. You know, it was
yeah.
lip service and nothing more. Um, I do remember being accosted by specifically Catholic
Hmm.
classmates who accused me of killing Jesus. And I told my parents about this, and my father said, just let them know it wasn't you. You weren't there. but if it'll make them feel better, you'll punch them. You'll kick their asses. My father
Okay.
wouldn't have said asses, but essentially. But uh, it was, and that kind of thing, that kind of intimidation of a fellow student would have been, if I had mentioned it to, I mean, I mentioned it to my parents, but they didn't bring it up with the school. If I'd brought it up in the school, I don't know what they would have done. I think some of my teachers would have stood up and put an end to that. But
So there's been a large, in our lifetimes, I think there's been a large shift in public education and its goals. Uh,
yes,
I don't know that
well,
between
yeah,
my grandparents and my parents, there was much change, or between my parents and me. I think their school experience and what public education was for and what they taught and the basic kind of curriculum, I don't think that changed much over those generations.
and there was room for change because it didn't serve all the students. It was
Well,
really geared towards certain kinds of students who could learn in in that way, in the way that schools are structured.
true.
Um, Much of which was, for some students, it was too fast. For a lot of us, it was too slow. And so we got bored and did want to do other stuff or faster stuff or um
Well, but when I was in school, there was always remedial classes, and there was always advanced. I
yeah,
was able to
that
get an advanced class. I was able to
yeah,
move half of my day in, I think it was fourth grade. No, I take that back. In third grade, I was able a handful of us, and part of it had to do with class crowding
yeah,
in the 60s and 70s.
yeah,
That was another issue. Um, Not enough teachers, not enough actual schools built
right.
to handle the population. So we were getting class sizes of 50 kids in a class.
Yeah, oh yeah.
So
I remember my um kindergarten were half day sessions, morning and afternoon, and there was a teacher and two assistant teachers, and
yeah.
each class there was like six. I mean, it was I forget what the total was, but then there were two separate homeroom classes going forward from that. But lots of kids, the tracking, the regular um and advanced, and then there was another. I mean, there were several levels. That for me didn't hit until high school.
Oh,
Um, um, and that was that
looking
was
back, I
much,
remember,
much better,
yeah, and
much
even
better.
in elementary school, I recall the sort of concept of learning at your own pace. I
Hmm.
mean, there was a kind of a minimum you had to get through. I remember there was this box of
Yeah, yeah, the
little modules.
SRA, I think it was.
I don't
Box
recall.
Scholastic Resource, something. Yeah, you had to get through them, and you had to
Yeah,
get through
they,
them
they had
all,
these
and you had,
color-coded tabs,
yeah,
and it was just like a little two-page thing, and there was you had to go get the answer sheet, or the questionnaire sheet from the teacher for that module.
yeah,
And then you'd read the module, and the questions were on the back, and you wrote the answers down on your sheet, and you handed the sheet in, and you put the little cardboard module back.
yeah,
And you could do those as quickly and as often as you wanted.
yeah,
And, I was 3 or 4 grades ahead of my class. Me and a handful of other kids,
yeah,
were
yeah,
just devouring these things because you got credit for
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Um, so that concept existed, and I think that I don't know that funding continued for that sort of thing after I left high school. It seems not. It seems like the idea was to more and more homogenize the class, um,
Hmm.
with the curriculum, I guess,
Yeah.
and just force kids through it and out of it.
And and part of that, and part of what has made that worse is teaching to the test. And
Well, because
that,
funding was based on how well people did they
right.
did on the tests.
But also it was how big an improvement there was in a school. So a school that was already high performing did
Yeah, true.
not rate well. It was a really flawed system, and I think it still exists and is still flawed. The During the No Child Left Behind during the George W. Bush
Yeah.
administration, great idea, great name, not so great the way it worked because it was all about testing,
Yeah.
testing. And go figure, the school testing industry was very small at the time,
Uh-huh.
but expanded greatly. And who was in charge? Who was the hmm, president, owner, founder, CEO of a testing company that grew enormously as a benefit of No Child Left Behind? George W. Bush's brother.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so a grift in some ways at the benefit, at the harm of a lot of students, because I know that I've had moments in the classroom where I know it says, because I've got a very detailed syllabus. I've been told by students I've got the longest syllabus that they've ever encountered. I said, yeah, it's a roadmap to how to succeed in the course. It tells you what you need to know and
Mm-hmm.
how to get there. It tells you what I'm looking for. It's a contract between you and me. And but the I I have at times said, no, we have to talk about this. You said something or something came up. I'm changing on the fly. I'm changing this because we need to talk about this
Right.
right now.
It's become
And
apparent to me that
it's a thing
yeah.
where yeah, and those moments have been really some of the best I've had teaching, where I
Well, it's
deviate from
responsive teaching, right? I mean,
exactly. What do you need to know? What do you need
or
to
at least or at least
understand?
or at least you know what they need to know. Where's the gap?
Yes,
How do you bridge the gap from where they are to where that is?
right. How do you need to how do you need to learn?
Right.
How can I help you learn? And I've told students I always hated what are known as weed out classes, designed to,
Oh.
you know, they start with huge numbers and by the end there are only a few left because the it's intentionally difficult and meant to eliminate all but the most most likely to succeed somehow.
Hmm.
I said I don't do that. If everybody succeeds, that's great.
Well, I think though
And
that I I I, I could accept a model like that for physicians and airline pilots.
yes, yes, but by the time they get to that,
Yeah.
they're already qualified generally. But
One would hope.
hope, yeah. But yeah, I said I want everybody to succeed, and I will do what I can as long as you're willing to put in the work. I will help you. Once it becomes clear that you want me to do it for you, I'm not. You have
Right.
to. If you do the work, I'm helping you understand it and how to do it better. I will tell you everything I know how to do. Um, I do miss being in the classroom. with students because I'm only teaching a couple of classes online now. But yeah, um, a good experience. I just got a lengthy thank you letter from a former student, former like in like 14, 15 years ago,
Oh, wow.
um, who thanked me. It was a lengthy letter thanking me and quoting me back to me about things I'd said. It's like, wow, that was really great. I never got that working in marketing and advertising, you
Never.
know. Um, a thank you from a client once in a while, but never something like this.
With
I
a nice
think in
fruit basket.
yeah, well, I I think teaching when teachers are the subject matter experts. They know how to teach. Are there some old, burned out, bad, not very good teachers anymore? Yeah, we all had them.
Right.
Um, but one of the reasons they get that way is when they're not allowed to teach the way they
And
need to, want to, were trained to.
and
Um,
this and let's bring this all the way back to the first the our first entree into this topic of education in public schools. And I think that by and large, or at least they certainly start as educators start as dedicated, caring people. I
mhm.
think. I'm convinced. Because otherwise, I mean, you're told the horror stories of it all over the place now.
Oh, and we've seen the
And
movies too, Blackboard Jungle and
oh yeah,
To
yeah.
Sir with Love and The
The
Substitute,
substitute.
all of those. Yeah.
Tom Berenger and Treat Williams,
Yeah.
two great actors of our day. But um,
I enjoyed those movies.
I enjoyed the original substitute with Tom Berenger,
Yeah.
not the Treat Williams so much. But anyway, before we get off into that,
Yeah.
because we could, as we
We could
know,
do a whole episode on classroom movies.
we could.
Yeah.
um, so, but it, so like I said, I believe that they are dedicated individuals and have a I'm not sure what to call it. They're called to that profession, I think, in a lot of ways.
I think I have an aptitude for it as
Okay,
well.
okay.
Yeah.
Um, they see something that they're going to be rewarded in that career
Yeah.
somehow. And I think that when they enter it, they genuinely want to help
Yep.
students. Um, and between, like you said, between eh, bumbling administrators and uh,
Not all of whom are bumbling.
no, but I've seen it over and over again,
Yeah.
one way or another.
Yeah.
Um, so the idea that, to me, that parents want to come in and force them to educate their child in the way they want is a excuse me is incredible hubris on the part of parents for one. It's in some ways insidious, and I think that, and I've read articles, in fact, that it is an actual centralized, organized movement to undermine secular education
Yeah.
in that way by going to parent teacher meetings and school board meetings and causing chaos, not even accomplishing anything particularly,
Yeah.
but making it chaotic and difficult to administer.
Well, and a lot of these people are the same people who want to establish a non-secular, a theocratic country in the United States.
Right.
They want a theocracy. And hell no.
No, hell no. That's You can't
Yeah.
be a constitutionalist and a theocrat. The people that
If
try to
you
claim the founding fathers were all Christians and they had this intention of making it
but
no.
that's how they do it. that's how they do it, by reinterpreting to the meaning that they want rather than reading the meaning that's there. And that's something that the so-called originalists on the Supreme Court do,
Yeah.
is it's not original. It's not the original intent. They're interpreting it as they want it to be. Um, it's,
But
it's,
if you raise enough uneducated people, you can get it through.
yes.
And that's
And
right. It's
so
full circle now.
as we come around, yeah. So, um, as I said, I don't think it was necessarily a plan from the start, but looking back, it sure, in retrospect, retrospect, it sure looks like one. It looks like all the pieces fit of underfund education, undereducate children to make them more susceptible to indoctrination while accusing the other side of indoctrination. It, yeah, I mean, there's so much of it that is,
Well,
I, it's
we start
un-American. I don't use that very often, that phrase, but damn, it sure is.
we start sounding like conspiracy theorists that,
I know
but
we do.
but but there are I don't want to say it would I think it would create the wrong image to say it was an organization, but
Yeah.
it's a movement among a group of powerful connected people.
I think it's not a conspiracy. When you think of a conspiracy, you think of people sitting down at the beginning and writing out a plan with all the contingencies, and it's not the Foundation trilogy, Asimov's, where
Yeah.
the guy could figured out all the great massive trends of, no, it's not that. It's that somebody starts something and somebody with the same or a related agenda says, "Oh, I see where I can add on a piece." And then another person says, "I can add on a piece." And they do that. And then
Or
it
even if it's
grows,
not
which is
adding,
why in retrospect it looks like a plan because it's got so many iterations.
or even if it's not even if it's not adding, it's a ground sort of level of, oh, yeah, I can buy into that.
Yeah.
And maybe gets, and I think there is always a sort of cynical um, element to those kind of movements where it's, I don't care about the ideology. I just want to hook into the power structure.
Yeah.
And I think that happens
Well,
in,
and I think the people who are more motivated by the power structure take advantage of and exploit the people who are driven by ideology.
oh, well, of course,
And the
absolutely.
people who start from ideology find that there's power to be gained there. I mean,
Right.
that's, maybe some of the wealthy televangelists actually started out believing what they're
I,
preaching, but then found it was the key to mansions and
I read it.
planes and wealth, you
I
know?
listened to a very interesting podcast about the rise and fall of Jim and Tammy Faye Baker.
Oh, man.
Very much the trajectory you are plotting there. That,
Hmm.
but but I think there was a self-delusion also
Yeah.
in that it wasn't, I think, in their deepest hearts, whether they were willing to recognize it or not, it was about the mansions and the money and the
Yeah.
vacations and all of that. But they I think for their own, call it sanity, for their own sanity, they attributed it all to God. That God was telling them
Yeah.
to do these things, and I think it's the generous part of me says they really believed it. It doesn't excuse it, but it wasn't entirely cynical. I think that like a lot of of the um, prosperity gospel movements is that I have all this because I deserve it because God wants me to have it.
Yeah.
And it's a self-justification, of course. Um,
Um, a medieval chivalric saying, "He who does more is more worthy." I forget where that comes from, but in the prosperity
I
gospel
think
is,
that's Desharney, I
I think
believe.
you may be right. I think you're probably right. But he who has more is more worthy is the prosperity gospel.
Yeah.
And oh man,
Well, it's a self-feeding thing, right? If you're more worthy, you'll get more. And if you get more,
yeah,
that proves that you're more worthy
yeah,
because you don't get it if you're not worthy. So,
yeah. Uh,
yeah, it is a insidious feedback loop
yeah,
um, that eventually justifies anything.
yes. And the tearful, I hope to be forgiven for my transgressions of many of the televangelists who were caught with their pants down.
Okay, okay, yes, divest yourself of all of your ill-gotten wealth,
Yeah,
put on a sackcloth, and do penance for 10 years. Okay, then maybe we'll forgive you.
yeah.
Go into a hermitage and help the poor and the sick for 10 years.
Um, so bringing it back around to
Hmm.
education. Um, I think parents should be involved in their children's education. When I was doing my student teaching and there was parent teacher conference night,
Right?
the parents who showed up were the ones whose kids were great and doing well, and the ones who didn't show up were the ones who were not doing well. And so parental involvement is absolutely essential, but it's things like my dad read me a bedtime story every night. So I gained a love of stories and reading.
Yeah.
And my mom helped me with my spelling words and other projects. I always got the tools I needed to do projects, and I always got a ride to the library or could take my bike there. It was that sort of thing, and the support. My mom going to school and telling the librarian I could read whatever I want, but it's not. That's parental involvement. The tools for communicating with the teacher and making sure that kids are doing their homework anymore in elementary and secondary education. The the there's classes generally or schools, there's a website, parents can log in, they can see what the kids assignments are, they can see
Hmm.
when they're due, they can ask the
They can
kids,
see whether they've been turned in.
have you done your homework, did you turn it in, do it, they can do all of that, and that helps enormously. That's parental involvement. Going to a teacher and saying, I don't like what you're teaching is,
Or
I
you
don't,
can't teach my kid that.
yeah.
Well,
Um,
your kid's getting the same education as every other kid. And the idea that,
I don't want my child to be exposed to something that will upset them or offend them or challenge them.
uh,
No, that's what education is.
yeah.
Teach them how to deal with being upset or being challenged or being offended, or teach them that. That's what you as parents can do.
And being part of a community. This to me, this is a one of the problems I have had. And my wife, for a lot of years before she had to re-enter the workforce, homeschooled her kids.
Yeah,
But I think homeschooling, let's there's that word indoctrination again.
yeah,
I think and she taught her kids, they are wonderfly well-adjusted, great kids. They're out there making careers and they're fantastic. But I've seen and it's almost kind of uh, comedic subject out there for the homeschooled kid who finally enters public schooling is socially awkward and is weird and quirky and whatever, and it's a shame, and it's not probably not fair. It's a stereotype,
Yeah.
but it certainly allows you all the indoctrination time you want.
Well,
um
it does require a parent who can stay home and do that
yes, of
and meet,
course.
because there are state requirements for
Yes.
homeschooling and there are support groups for homeschooling, and it requires a parent who can do that, which most people with children have to have. Both parents have to work, and sometimes can't because the cost of childcare is so expensive. So, um, yeah, it is, um, once again, there's something that's related. Times of greatest prosperity in the country are the times when people demand the greatest increase in their civil rights, social rights.
Okay.
Um, in and that has occurred throughout the history of the country. So keeping people economically insecure makes it more likely that they won't rock the boat. And that works until
So the boat gets
the
turned over.
economic security is so great that the people storm the Bastille.
Right. I'm not sure. I'm trying to line up the most prosperous years
That
with
that
the civil rights
I
movement,
can
but
give you sources for that, but that's
it also
um
it also requires you to define what prosperity for the country is.
yes. And we could do that, but that's like moving into a different subject.
Yeah, yeah. But so about time for us to wrap up, but
Yeah.
getting back to this problem I have in general, and we've pointed to a lot of factors that have brought us to this point.
Hmm.
Um, but I find it disturbing and disappointing. And what you were saying earlier is that I believe the parent's role in a curriculum put together by experts, right, to provide the best education possible that informs and equips good citizenship going forward, right? That's to me what public education should be doing,
Hmm.
is preparing you for being a productive member of society, being a good citizen, being an intelligent voter. All of those things are what public education, and I think that was the aim of our founding fathers in setting up a public education system.
Yeah, in
Were,
contrast to the class-based
yeah,
system in England.
right. So
Yeah.
those three things, I think, are what public education are supposed to accomplish. So a good curriculum does those things, and it's the parent's job not to dictate it, but to reinforce it at home.
Yeah. Help their student with it. Give them the resources they need, give them the help they need. Find if they're
Right.
struggling, find extra, talk to the teacher who will help. To, engage in that way. Yeah, absolutely. Support.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
agreed.
certainly if to me, the watchdog is when you start learning dogma in school, that's the red flag for the parents,
Yeah.
not, uh, you know, well, you talked about Jimmy having two fathers in class, and I don't want my child exposed to that. Well, sorry, your child's going to get exposed to it at some point in their life, or they might as well get used to it now.
Yeah. Yep.
And and it's a byproduct, but an important side effect of going to a public school is you become part of the public.
Yeah. And you get exposed to people who are not like you
Right.
and are different. And I think one of the downsides of the tracked classes, advanced placement and others, is you tend to be with one of the positives is you tend to be with people who are intellectual peers you can talk to and engage with. One of
May
the
challenge you a
downsides,
little.
yeah, and one of the downsides is you're not engaging with, meeting, getting to know as much the other people who are part of your public and your
Hmm.
age peers. So I think sometimes classes that are not just tracked are good for that. And for me, it was mostly like study hall, but
Yeah,
we weren't allowed to talk in study hall. So it was,
right. Not a lot of socialization there.
yeah, yeah.
Well,
So,
even I mean, in elementary school, you had recess, right? And that
yeah,
part of that is
exactly.
is a
Yeah,
break from the lesson, and you give your mind, you give yourself a little recreation to break up the sitting in a desk and staring in one direction. But it also required you to interact with your classmates
yeah.
in some
Learn how to defend yourself from bullies.
and negotiate. You know, I
Yeah,
want to
and
play
when
this game. I want to play this other game. Who decides who play? How do we decide who plays?
yeah,
You know, um,
and
yeah,
when negotiation doesn't work, there's applied physical diplomacy.
yeah. We often got in trouble for applied physical diplomacy.
Yeah,
Uh, you were encouraged to negotiate
yeah,
or withdraw.
yeah.
So,
I'm not
um,
advocating that kids beat each other up, but
I'm
I
not
my
educating.
parent
I'm not advocating that adults do it either.
no, no, I agree. Um, but when I had trouble with a bully and I couldn't talk my way out of it, as my parents had taught me to do, and I got into a fight, my parents said, "Well, if you're going to have to get into a fight, you're going to win." They took me to a dojo to study.
Yeah,
So,
same. Yeah, I had a similar experience.
yeah,
I had bullies, and there's always a bully,
there
right?
always is. And bullies are insecure,
For
and
the most part. I mean,
for
I
the most
really only
part,
had to clip one time to have him make him leave me alone, and that was a lesson I learned early.
yeah,
And it's a worthwhile lesson because even if it's not physically bullying, there are bullies out there. And
there
some
are
point in your life, you need to stand up to a bully,
exactly.
or not, or accept your lot.
Yeah.
So, and
And
we
I think parents, the groups of parents who are trying to control public education are bullies and need to be stood up to
agreed, agreed.
because they won't negotiate. They use intimidation tactics, as you said,
Hmm.
flooding school board meetings, getting some of their ilk trying to elect them to school boards. So,
And that's the movement that I was talking about. This
yeah,
is a top-down organized
yeah,
thing that's
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
Republican Party, it may be happening in the Democratic Party too, but I doubt it.
yeah,
The Republican campaign funds are being used to elect national campaign funds are being used to elect local school board members.
yeah.
Um, and that's crazy. It's appalling, is to me is what it is, but it's
Because
legal.
the opposite of if an educated populace makes for a democracy requires an educated populace, then
Yeah.
having an uneducated populace makes an authoritarian government more possible.
Yep.
And
There's
that's ultimately what it comes down to.
plenty of political philosophers since the since the 17th century, let alone the 18th century, when a lot of this stuff was propagated, is that the educating educate the population is the best thing for the society. That an uneducated populace is susceptible to tyranny,
Yep.
more
Yep.
susceptible to
Yep.
tyranny. So, and if if you look around and see who is trying to reduce the thinking and the education in a country, they are most likely aiming towards some kind of tyranny.
Yep.
So who's doing that? If you look around, you know, and the people that are claiming that, well, you're making me use new pronouns, that's tyranny. No, you don't understand tyranny, buddy.
You're making me is a pronoun. Yeah.
Yeah,
They don't understand. Yeah. Tyranny. Yeah. So,
yeah. It's, it's if you look at tyranny as a system that takes away your rights, that's what tyranny is,
yeah.
right?
I watched um the first season. I really hope there'll be more of the three body problem um series. Really
Yep,
good, but it begins showing recreating a scene from the Cultural Revolution in China,
yeah.
and where education and thinking were demonized, criminalized, punished.
Oh, sure.
And that's that's the result. I mean, that's what happens if you demonize education. And
Well,
I was
nationalism
yeah,
nationalism is a one-for-one replacement for intellect,
yeah, yeah.
right? Where the only thing conformity and loyalty are all that matters
And
to a nationalist philosophy. Hmm?
religious nationalism, specifically Christian nationalism.
It just makes it easier.
Yeah,
That's just grease on the nationalist
yeah,
dildo that you're getting
yeah.
fucked
Well, and
with.
it's not necessary. I mean, the religion, the Cultural Revolution was specifically anti-religion. So,
Well, because so that you could not have any belief above the state.
right, right.
I mean, and the fascists do that too. Hitler
Yeah,
did the same thing.
yeah,
Right? He used religion to get in to
yeah,
office and then started closing churches.
yeah.
So,
Because they were in opposition.
or
Some of them,
at
some of
least
them were in
offered
sub,
at
some
least
in
offered an
support.
opposing viewpoint.
Right, right. Some of them. I think we have um, thoroughly examined this topic.
I agree.
Read
There's
a book.
certain, yeah,
Read a book.
like your teacher told you.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah, then I think we made the point.
Yeah,
Um, we touch on this over and over again.
we do.
Uh, that
Well,
and this,
we
as far as
both
the
believe
virtues
in.
are concerned,
Yeah, go ahead.
as far as the virtues are concerned, this goes to humility and courage, and those top three or four that we
And
always seem to be coming
honesty
back to.
and fortitude and perseverance and justice and yeah, touches on a lot of them.
Yep, that all of these and
Yeah,
in school you are supposed to be learning all of those things along with reading and writing and
yeah.
uh, how to diagram a sentence for God's sake. Um,
No, they don't even do that anymore.
no, no. So, uh, if you if you liked it, what we said, excuse me, if you liked our little diatribe this evening, if you didn't like it, let us know. Please even if you didn't like it, share, share, even if it's to say, look at these idiots, what are they talking about?
Yeah,
Um, give us new subjects. If you didn't like this one, give us one. You're so smart. And
So, yeah,
and until you do, and until we see you next time, be thou
a good night.
and true.